Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Andrew Ripley. We're just waiting for people to get logged in here. So we'll probably start just 2 minutes after the hour in case people are stuck in traffic or overslept after their lunchtime nap. So just give us a couple minutes, and we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to get in. And again, my name is Andrew Ripley, and I'll be on just in a little bit here. And I hope everybody's having a good day. And we are going to get, as I said, started here just after the hour. Just in case you're logging in and you're wondering why there's some silence or the delay, we're just waiting for a couple of people to show up. If they're getting their audio hooked up, making sure their video works, downloading the app, all the good stuff that happens when you come to a live webinar or the reasons you're late to a party. Want to make sure that everybody gets in on it. And we'll try to give this just another minute, letting people log in and get online. People hopping off other conference calls and other webinars, finishing up lunch. Want to make sure everybody gets on. And just about another 45 seconds here, we'll get things kicked off.
All right. Andrew, how's the weather over in Florida today? It's beautiful over here in Austin, Texas.
Today it was nice. Yesterday I would say it was cold in Florida. It was in the 30s, which is typically cold, but we're warming back up to the 70s. And the reason everybody loves to come to Florida during the winter seasons. How about you?
Yeah, we had rained all day yesterday, and but yeah, today the sun's out. Everything's looking beautiful, so can't complain. It's going to be in the, I think it's about 65 degrees for the high today. So
nice, perfect, good stuff.
Yep.
All right, guys. It is 2:02 in Florida, and we'll just go ahead and let's go ahead and get this kicked off. So good afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending. My name is Andrew Ripley. Like to believe it or not, I am with xByte Technologies. I'm the Dell Server expert. Along with me today is the main presenter, which is Tyson Tyler. He is a VSAN specialist at VMware. So good afternoon, Tyson.
Good afternoon, Andrew. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Today we're going to go over VMware's roadmap and how xByte plays a part in that solution. Just a couple of housekeeping tips right away. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat section in the area on the dashboard where there's available areas for you to chat in. Also, this is going to be recorded, so if you want a recording of this for later usage, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll make sure that you get a copy, or that our media presenter, Lindsay, and marketing director here at xByte will be able to help get that out to you as well. For those who aren't familiar with xByte Technologies, we are a VMware and Dell partner, but our relationship is very unique, which you'll find out how we give you that value add and that benefit moving forward. So if there is anything that we can do for you, please let us know. But before we get into all of that, Tyson, I will give you the floor, and let's hear the great things that are coming out of VMware.
All right, Andrew, I appreciate that. And good afternoon, good morning, everybody, wherever you may be. We appreciate your time today. Just for a quick agenda, we're going to kick things off with the vision of VMware. A lot of customers think we only do compute virtualization, but we do have a portfolio of products and services that address all areas of the data center and cloud computing. So we'll just do a high-level look at VMware's vision, and then we'll kind of jump into our VSAN solution, which is the next steps that our customers are taking to modernize their data centers. So we'll do a technical overview of the VSAN Hyper-Converged platform. And then from there, we'll take a look at some configurations that xByte has put together, really kind of highlight their value proposition and why they've been such a good partner for VMware. From there, we can take a look at some of the tools and assessments that we leverage for designing these solutions. And then at the end, we'll go ahead and wrap it up with some Q&A. So again, like Andrew mentioned, if there's any questions, feel free to drop those into the chat window. And once we get to the end of the session, we'll go ahead and address those, have a nice Q&A, and let everybody go about their day. So again, appreciate the time. My name's Tyson Taylor. I'm one of the product specialists here for VMware. I've been with VMware for almost 8 years now. So, you know, it's been a long time in the software space, but working with some of our fastest growing customers on modernizing their data centers. So to kick it off, this slide right here just shows VMware's overall vision. Any cloud, any application, any device. So we've got a lot of stuff going on here, but I'll just kind of quickly speak through this slide because it's very important. So where VMware first made our impact in the market was about 20 years ago, whenever we were able to virtualize the CPU and memory on the x86 server platform. So I'll go ahead and draw a little box around this compute section here. So that's where it all began back in the day. So basically, we were able to take companies who were running, let's say, 100 servers, physical servers to support their business. Just by virtualizing that server platform, we were able to reduce that footprint down to, 10 servers or less. So made a pretty big impact. It completely changed the way customers are running their data centers. So what we're doing nowadays is we're taking those same virtualization principles and we're applying that to networking as well as storage. So now we can take those same benefits of, efficiencies, simplification of management, and now we're cascading that across storage as well as networking. So whenever we virtualize these three components, that's what we're calling on our side a software-defined data center. And with these components, we also like to call this VMware's Cloud Foundation. So what a lot of our customers are not aware of is some of the partnerships we have over here in the public cloud space. Partnerships with big boys like AWS, Azure, along with 4,200 other partners that specialize in certain areas and services. But what the idea is, it's being able to stretch this Cloud Foundation platform into any of our cloud partners. So this way, you're going to have consistent infrastructure and operations across both of these worlds. So VMware, we've been pioneering the term for quite some time, hybrid cloud. The ability to run workloads at home in your private data center, to run workloads in a public cloud, but VMware offers a platform where you can move these workloads freely between these two environments without any dependencies. So that's pretty amazing right there. Nobody can do this in today's market. Not only can we vMotion your workloads between server nodes in your private data center, but now we can send them out to AWS or Azure, and then we give you a safe way of bringing those back home. So just big picture, hybrid cloud, that is the primary focus of VMware's vision. On the call, I'm pretty sure you're well aware, VMware supports just about any application, and then we can push that out to any type of device, whether it's a thin client, a smartphone, or a smart car. We're now giving our customers the ability to connect out on the edge, bring that data back home to your core data centers, and use that for, AI, machine learning. So pretty cool stuff here. So What we're going to do now in the next few slides is just kind of talk about VMware's full stack approach, this software-defined data center with our cloud foundation. So we'll just kind of touch on that real quickly so you have an understanding of what all of our capabilities are. So again, these are kind of the three different sections. We have, core hyper-converged, full stack hyper-converged, and then connecting to our private and public cloud partners. Go ahead and build out this slide here. So again, like I mentioned earlier, everybody should be well aware of what we did in the compute space with compute virtualization. Now we are in the market of software-defined storage and software-defined networking. So this is pretty interesting if you think about it. When you go to create a virtual machine now, not only can you provision the compute, but now we can provision the storage, what type of performance, how do you want to protect it, how do you want to back it up. And then on top of that, we can go ahead and assign that application an IP address. We can wrap it with virtual firewalls. We can protect it. So now being able to do this entire provisioning process through software, which in today's world, this could take days, weeks, or months, depending on how many teams and how many handoffs you have to do. We've now cut this provisioning process down into minutes. On top of that, we have our cloud management suite that sits on top of everything, where we can fully automate application provisioning, infrastructure provisioning, and give you all the analytic tools to really be proactive with that infrastructure and make sure you're being as efficient as possible. And then we layer everything with our lifecycle management and automation. So now all the patching and updates, everything that I'm sure people on the phone do not care to do, we can take that off your plate and really have you automated, self-sufficient data center. And last thing I want to mention on this is we have intrinsic security layered all throughout each of these 5 pillars. We have VM encryption in the compute layer. We have data at rest encryption in the storage layer, virtual firewalls into the networking, configuration management and governance on the management side. So all throughout these different layers, we have security built in, which is top of mind for a lot of the customers we're working with. And just real quick, I just want to point out where we sit in the marketplace in these 5 different sections. So VMware, I've been here for 8 years. I love the company because we do have best of breed products. Number 1 in server virtualization, storage, software-defined networking, number 1. We have WAN optimization solutions to give you better quality of service out there on the edge, cloud management, end-user computing. I mean, we are leading the charge across every front here. So just wanted to share this quickly on where we stand. And again, just another slide that is showing this VMware Cloud Foundation. Again, we're virtualizing all these different components with a standardized architecture, everything that has been tested and validated. So this way you have this, public cloud look and feel, but this is back at your core data center. And again, this is having consistent infrastructure and operations between these 2 worlds. So it doesn't matter where your workload is running, it's going to look and feel like a VMware environment, and then also able to stretch this out to the edge and manage this all together. So just another look at the cloud foundation, this full stack approach that we have. And then lastly, this is another look at leveraging our public cloud partners. So again, we have Cloud Foundation for your private data center. All of our cloud partners are running the same components in their private and their public clouds. And then once you leverage our public cloud partners, AWS is the biggest, by the way. Now you can leverage their regional to really stretch your business into new markets. And then on top of that, we can even cross-connect that into their service catalog. So now if you want to build those next generation apps, containers, Kubernetes, you can now build that on the AWS footprint, leverage their tools, and then whenever you're ready, you can bring that workload back over here to your private data center. So giving you the ability to move these applications around without any hardware dependencies, that's pretty valuable to a lot of our customers. Let's see here. And so what's this going to do for your business with this full stack approach? It's pretty much going to prepare you for just about anything that your business is going to encounter. So if you want to do the container and really, build applications very quickly, seamlessly, do you want to grow by merger acquisition or leverage the multi-cloud world that we're living in? This cloud foundation is getting you ready for just about anything that your business is going to encounter. Let's see here. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at the next logical step for our customers. The majority of our customers are already using vSphere today. The next step is bringing VSAN into the picture, so that way we can make you more efficient, reduce the footprint, and get you ready for this full stack approach. To be honest with you, the full stack approach, it can get expensive. That's something VMware is known for. We're talking, $10,000 to $20,000 of CPU here. So this right now is being adopted by our, Fortune 2000 customers, but it's slowly trickling down into the SMB space. For our mid-market and smaller customers, this core HCI with vSphere and VSAN is the next logical step. So let's take a look into that. So that begins with Hyper-Converged. So before I start speaking through this slide, I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay, and we're going to do a quick poll to see who is familiar with Hyper-Converged and who may be using Hyper-Converged already today. So it looks like she just opened up the poll, so we'll just give a few seconds to let everybody disposition that. Let's take a look here. Right. Yeah, it's pretty surprising to me. Hyper-Converged, it's actually been around, since about 2012 is kind of when it started taking off, but it's really been adopted aggressively these last few years. But I speak with, on average, around 20 VMware customers a week, and it's pretty eye-opening to hear that the majority of those are not familiar with the concept or what Hyper-Converged is in general. So hopefully during this piece of the session, we'll give you a good understanding of the benefits, how that could impact your day-to-day, and more importantly, we're going to give you VMware's approach on Hyper-Converged compared to some of the other options out there. Okay, so it looks like we'll go ahead and wrap up the poll here and jump back into the presentation. Let's see here. Right. Yeah, it looks like we're at about 84% on the attendees who dispositioned, and we'll have to work with that. So, okay, let's go ahead and continue now. So again, over here on the left, this is what we call a traditional three-tiered architecture. This is the way the majority of VMware environments are set up today and have been for the last 15 plus years. So it's kind of siloed in three different sections. You've got your rack or blade servers running in one section. If you want to be able to use the features that VMware is known for, such as vMotion, high availability, you got to have shared storage. If you don't have that shared storage, you can't move those VMs around and you can't protect them with failover features. So that external storage is pretty important, but everybody on the line is probably well aware it's the most expensive piece of hardware in your rack enclosure. We always have a couple switches in the mix for redundancy between those servers and storage array. So there's nothing wrong with this. This has worked extremely well for the last, decade and a half. But essentially what we're doing is we're taking the drives from the external storage and we're moving those bad boys back over here into the servers like they were in the good old days. So basically what Hyper-Converged is, it's running the compute and the storage out of your server nodes. Everything's virtualized. Everything's managed by your vCenter server. So now what this means is you can do vMotion, you can do high availability without needing that big, expensive SAN. So that's pretty exciting when customers hear that, especially the people who are signing the checks. So now we can do everything that you've been doing on a smaller footprint. It's going to be easier to manage. easier to provision those resources, and far easier to scale. And we'll get into that here in a second. But again, just hyper-converged infrastructure. It's basically taking a rack mount server, cramming it full of hard drives. We virtualize it so that way you can share and protect that storage across your cluster. Real quick, just want to show you what this looks like in a real customer environment. So this is a customer we worked with last year. Over here on the left was his 8-node Dell cluster that he ran for about 7 or 8 years. And everything was connected to this VNXSAN. So as you can see, this customer had 2 full racks of hardware. Nothing wrong with this. This environment literally ran for almost 8 years without any downtime. But the Dell servers and this EMC storage array was going out of support. So the customer had to, we had to refresh it with something. So we were able to take the 100 VMs that were running on this footprint, and we're able to migrate it over to this footprint here, 4 use of rack space. So whenever this was all said and done, the customer was pretty excited. Just the heating and cooling that you're saving, the simplification of management. This just really shows the impact that VMware can make whenever you virtualize your compute and you virtualize your storage with vSAN. So let's take a look at the architecture. What's actually going on inside of those server nodes? So what we're looking at here is a high-level architecture of a 3-node cluster. So looking at this, again, we're cramming these servers full of hard drives. We're going to virtualize all this disk, and we're going to abstract it and present it to you as one big data store inside your vCenter server. So we recommend starting with 3 hosts. However, we do support 2 hosts for smaller environments. We can do hybrid, all flash, 1 gig, 10 gig. So really, I mean, we can design this in a number of different ways to specifically meet your needs and your performance requirements. We can scale it out to 64 nodes. So we can take this pretty far if you need us to. But I'm going to take a second and just kind of talk about the disk configuration. So as you can see here, we have a SSD, which there's always going to be at least one SSD for your caching drive. So any read or write that takes place on the VM, it's going to happen on that write-intensive SSD. Behind the SSD, we have our capacity drives. And this can be either more SSD or it can be spindles, depending if you want that hybrid or that all-flash design. So whenever those read and writes take place on the SSD, once the data slows down or gets cold, we'll then destage that down here into this capacity layer. So it's kind of a tiered storage approach. This is what's happening on the back end. The little green box here, this is going to be your VMDK, your VM with its data. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have another copy of that VMDK on another host in the cluster. This is how we address redundancy and availability. So you'll have a primary and you'll have a secondary, and we'll be doing simultaneous writes to that same VM on each of those 2 hosts. So what this means is if you lose, ESXi1 here, or if you lose your caching drive, well then that's where high availability would kick in and this VM would go live. So this is how we're going to make sure there's no significant downtime within the environment. So this is just a little bit of what's going on under the hood of these rack mount servers when you're using vSphere and vSAN together. This slide here, I think, does a good job of illustrating the scalability of this solution. So like I mentioned earlier, we can start with as few as 2 nodes. You can always scale out by adding additional nodes. Pretty straightforward. Again, we can scale it out all the way to 64 servers in a cluster. But whenever we design these environments, we'd like to understand what your capacity needs are today, and we'll design that, but we'll leave a lot of open real estate inside of that server. And by open real estate, I mean open drive slots. So whenever you use your, let's say 30 terabytes, well then now we can increase your storage simply by adding hard drives. And really, you just pop in the hot swappable drive, you go to vCenter Server under the storage tab, and you claim that capacity. So you can literally use it in minutes. You don't have to reboot the host. You don't have to reboot the VM. So very quick and easy, which customers love. So if you need more storage, we just throw in some cheap spindles. If you need more performance, we'll just throw in more SSDs. And now you've got more IOPS to kick out to your VMs. So being able to increase these resources incrementally is very powerful for our customers. Because if you have a traditional SAN, like an EqualLogic or Compellent or NetApp, you just can't exactly put one drive in to increase storage. You got to put in a whole nother shelf, a whole nother unit. You got to buy all that storage up front. So being able to incrementally scale your resources is extremely valuable to our customers. Okay, moving along. Let's talk a little bit about the management, because this is a different management approach versus a traditional SAN. So we're not going to be carving up LUNs. We're not going to be carving up volumes. You're not going to have to go back and re-provision storage if you need to create more space. When you have a vSAN cluster, you're essentially going to set up some storage policies. And those policies are going to dictate availability and performance. So whenever you create the VM, it's, hey, what kind of performance do I need? Do I need this running on SSDs? Do I want it on spindles? Yes.
Hey, we had a question that came in, and I think this is a good place for it. When using an all-flash configuration, is it best to use the RAID disks or use the onboard controller, or just let vCenter configure all the disks and storage?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So we're not going to be doing RAID at a disk level. We're actually going to be doing RAID at a node level. So we'll still use a typical HBA, but we're going to leave that in pass-through mode, and all the RAID at the node level is going to be handled through VMware software.
Perfect.
So again, yep. So yeah, we actually call it RAIN, redundant array of independent nodes. So whenever you create a VM, you'll have that VM on one host, but then we'll have a mirrored copy of that VM on another host. And you can, with the management here, you can dictate how many copies you want to have. So if it's a SQL server, something that's pretty critical to your business, okay, maybe I want to have a copy on every host. That way, if I have a failure or if I'm down for maintenance, I'm still protected.
So
yeah,
on the
really
last slide is as well, you mentioned the SSD being used for caching. Good question that came up was, does it need to be read intensive or write intensive, or is it best to have mixed use SSD?
That's a really good question. So from what I've been told from my engineers, we're using high endurance, and I believe they're write intensive SSDs. So they're a little bit more expensive on the caching side. If you want to go an all flash design, the SSDs down in the capacity layer don't have to have the same endurance grade. So those are going to be less expensive. But for the caching drives, we want the SSDs. I'll have to check with my engineer. I know they're going to be write intensive, but they may also be read intensive as well. But they're going to be on the higher end in terms of cost for those SSDs. But you've only, you need a minimum of one of those in each host.
And we can help with that too. So.
Yep. And that's why I like working with xByte, because they carry these drives in stock. I mean, they literally have thousands of them, all that are vSAN compatible. They're on our hardware compatibility list. So yeah, if you need to add, capacity, you need to add cache, these guys have the hardware on site. They have the HBAs that we support, and I haven't seen anybody sell them less than what they do. So kudos to xByte, and we'll get into more of those options here later on in the presentation. But to finish up here on the management, again, so whenever you create a VM, hey, how available does it need to be? What kind of performance does it need to have? Once you create those policies and deploy it, you don't have to worry about it ever again. So you set it, you forget it, you don't have to go back and re-provision the storage. So again, it ends up saving our, storage administrators, whoever's managing this, saves you a lot of time on the back end. Okay, moving along here. So I want to take a couple minutes and show a couple slides on the difference in architecture between the VMware vSAN solution versus our competitors. So what I'm sharing right now is a high-level architecture of every one of our competitors. What they require is what you see here is a storage VM. So it's kind of a bolt-on approach. So this storage VM, if you notice, it's a lot bigger than the rest of the VMs. That's because it takes a lot of resources. It's usually going to take 64 gigs of RAM, 96 gigs of RAM, sometimes more, depending on how large it's going to be. And you got to run one on every host. So whenever our competitors design and size their solutions, they have to take this into account. So it really hammers on the CPU and RAM on your hardware. What VMware does with vSAN, it's actually an in-kernel architecture. So vSAN, it's just a feature of vSphere. So because of that, we don't require any bolt-on VMs, any additional VMs to make it work. It's a native feature in our hypervisor. So because of that, we're about 30% more efficient, which means we can run more VMs on the hardware, which means you don't need to buy as much hardware. And that's kind of what VMware has always been about. Let's help you do more with less. So again, it's a bolt-on architecture versus in-kernel architecture. That's a big difference there, big differentiator with us and our competitors. And let's also talk about a couple of use cases. I'm going to just touch on two of them here. These are the fastest growing use cases that I see with our customers as of the last couple of years. So the first one is a remote office, branch office use case. So what we're looking at here is a core primary data center running your vCenter server appliance. So we've got a 4-node cluster. What we can do is we actually support 2-node vSAN clusters. So if you have a remote office or a branch office that's only running 5 or 6 VMs, well, back in the day, if you want to get redundancy out there at that branch office, it would require you to buy 2 hosts and a SAN, and that's just way too expensive to get protection for just a handful of VMs. So now with vSAN, we can go with a 2-node configuration. We can mirror the VMs between the 2 nodes. We allow you to manage it back at your core data center here. So when you log into the vCenter server, you'll see your 4-node production cluster. You'll see these 2-node clusters out here on the edge, and you can manage them all with your with one vCenter server instance. So now you can vMotion out on the edge. You have HA in case something fails. We have a lot of customers, again, that have just one server running out there on the edge. That one server goes down, that office is down until you can send a technician out there. So this is giving you better redundancy and availability out on the edge at a very good price. We also have another way of licensing this. Typically, vSAN and vSphere is licensed per CPU, but we can also license it per VM. So that way, it's much more cost effective to have this type of solution out on the edge. So just wanted to share that real quick. Just to add on to that, with these 2-node configurations, we can also direct connect the 2 servers. So this means you don't even need a switch out there on the edge. So just saving you more money, great performance and everything. So just wanted to point this out as well. And the last use case that I'm going to touch on is for disaster recovery. Seems to be top of mind for everybody. Seems like everybody I talk to is wanting a better DR plan. What the majority of customers are doing today is if you do have 2 sites, the majority are just simply replicating between those 2 sites, and then hopefully you can fail over and recover in a timely manner. But it always takes longer than we expect it to. So what we're able to do now is if you do have 2 different sites, we can actually stretch the compute and the storage between the sites. So we can set it up to where it's an active data center. So you actually have live VMs running at both sides. The only caveat here is it does require 10 gig or fiber connection between these 2 sites. So between them, you need a sub 5 millisecond round trip latency. So if you have that type of bandwidth, then we can give you this option of running an active setup, and it's extremely affordable. So now, if your production site loses the host, or if you lose the site, well, these VMs are already live, ready to go. So they just fire up if you were to have any type of failures over here. Or you can vMotion them back and forth if you need to take this site down for maintenance. So just giving you a lot of flexibility here with a stretched cluster use case for disaster recovery. And what I really love is this right here, 0 RPO. So again, there's no failover, there's no recovery, there's no having to worry about recovering from your tape. So a lot of customers that are, have experienced failures or just not satisfied with their current DR plan, a lot of those customers are now jumping into this solution here. Okay, so my favorite part. Oops. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, so how do we get started? This is I think pretty important. Some of the deployment options. So we've got a few here, and this is another kind of differentiator for VMware and VSAN. A lot of our competitors, they simply want to push their appliance. So hey, let's rip out your gear. Let's do a forklift upgrade to the appliance, which is all fine. That's great. We actually offer an appliance as well. It's jointly engineered with Dell and EMC, called VxRail. So if you do want something that's convenient, something that you can use as soon as they deliver it to you, this appliance is a good option. Basically, we just need to know what your compute, storage, and I/O requirements are, and we can size you up with a 3 or 4 node appliance all the way up to a full rack. And you can get this through xByte, but this appliance option, you tend to pay a premium with it. Okay, that convenience does come with a cost. So what we do with our partner xByte is we look at these VSAN ready nodes. Okay, so basically, if you get any 13, 14 gen Dell server, HP, Lenovo, you see all the different OEMs that we support. So basically, if you get 3 or 4 Dell servers and cluster them together, put some vSphere and VSAN on them, well, then you pretty much built your own appliance, but you saved yourself a lot of money doing it that way. So these are VSAN ready nodes, and again, any Dell server that's got the 30 or 40 at the end, those are going to be supported servers for a VSAN solution. The last option is kind of a build your own retrofit. So I'm sure some of the attendees on the phone today, you probably already have some Dell, R430s or 630s or 740s. So what we can do is we can take those servers that you already own and we can retrofit those into a VSAN cluster. The only 2 components that we care about is the disk controller. That's always going to be an HBA 330 for a Dell solution, and xByte does carry those in stock for a great price. The last item is going to be the drives. We just got to make sure the drives are on our compatibility list. And like we mentioned earlier, xByte carries thousands of these in stock. So if you're looking for a new way to run your environment, maybe you're running out of storage, well, we can take those R630s or 730s, cram them full of drives, and build you a VSAN solution out of hardware that you already own and do it for a really, really solid price. So these are the 3 different options here. You can go with the appliance, we can build something from scratch with new hardware, or we can retrofit gear that you already have today. And moving on here, we've got some examples that xByte has put together, a few different configurations with some ballpark pricing. So this right here just kind of gives you an idea of how we can configure this, where the pricing is coming in at. I'm just going to take a quick look at configuration 1. So, these are 3 PowerEdge R740 servers. So these are the 2U model configuration you're looking at here. Dell list price on these 3 servers, around $121K. Looks like with discounts, you can probably get that around the $84K price point. xByte is able to do this for under $70K, and that's also including the VMware licensing cost, which is listed down here. So $20,000 of that is VMware licensing cost. Nobody pays lists, so I'd imagine this number right here, we can actually get it a lot less expensive. And we can change up these components. They can change out whatever type of processor you want to have, how much drive space, how much usable capacity, etc. So just kind of giving you some ideas here of different configurations. And I'll turn it over to Andrew for a moment. He's going to speak to this as well. So Andrew,
All right.
I'll go ahead and pass that back over to you.
Thanks, Tyson. I really appreciate that. And I think one of the first things I want to make sure that people are aware of, one is we're a full Dell partner and a full VMware partner. So being a full Dell partner, we can sell everything. So on the previous screen, we had VxRail, as Tyson mentioned. We can do the full VxRail solution, and that's a white glove solution, right? Everything is an all-in-one package, and we get that directly from Dell. And as a Dell partner, we would move that and sell that directly through the channel to you. So, and the original first thing I wanted to point out was what Tyson just said is the price. That is the most glaring thing that you see on this slide, is how do we get the pricing down so low? So even if you were a mass purchaser from Dell, if you were buying thousands and thousands of servers, you could probably get a 30% discount. These are going to be guys that buy in large lots and quantities. And that's how they're able to drive their prices down. And that's what we do. We buy in large lots of equipment from Dell, and we bring it in-house, and we rebuild to our customer specs. So we're able to drive the price down because when we buy all of the equipment from Dell, we own it. It's ours. So we don't have to follow the pricing scheme that Dell has set up for all the rest of the partners that are delivering directly from Dell to them. So unlike your standard partners, because we own it, we can become very competitive in being able to build that modern, budget-friendly data center that you're looking for. And as Tyson mentioned, you're looking for, a 2 to 3 node bundle. And so what we've done here is we put a couple of these configurations together, right? And so you can see that you have a 3-node cluster, a 4-node cluster, and then you have another 4-node cluster, and the drives vary. Again, these are all customizable. I only did this as to point out the very glaring fact that we could do it for almost half on the pricing for what you can see what you get it by going directly to the manufacturer. So that is the number one thing. And again, we have all of this equipment in stock. So what you don't see on this slide is the fact that we're able to build the equipment here at xByte with Dell Certified Technicians, and we're able to get those servers out to you in 3 days versus what could be weeks and or months if you're going direct to the manufacturer. So what we like to say is, we're great in budget competitive situations. We're fast to delivery, and it comes with full Dell warranty. So if you're looking for mission critical, if you're looking for that pro support, it all comes direct from, all the equipment is direct from Dell. We get it in, we reconfigure it for our customers, and that's how you're able to save money but building these solutions with these servers. And as we move to the next slide, Tyson mentioned it more than once, and I really appreciate that, is that we're looking at the full HCI deployment with pre-existing servers. And he said it, if it's on the hardware compatibility list, and for Dell, it's on the 13th and 14th generation servers, right? So what we're going to be looking at is we're going to take your live optics, we're going to see what you're running inside of your infrastructure, and we're going to say, okay, Mr. Customer, these servers are completely compatible with this equipment inside of it. We're going to be able to move them into a VSAN environment. And what that means to you is that you're going to save some money because you have existing equipment that you can repurpose to put in your new infrastructure, right? And then whatever isn't available, well, we have over 250,000 parts in stock here at xByte. So if we can upgrade your systems and say, let's say your drives aren't compatible, or you want to move to an all-flash array, or your RAID controller is not available, guess what? We have that in stock. And because we buy in large lots of equipment, we have the parts down for a lower price than you would probably get direct. So it would be great. You send it over to us. We retrofit your existing x86 servers if they're on the hardware compatibility list, and then we're able to get you into that modern data center and a budget-friendly price again. So that's what it means for us being able to help you out in that situation.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that, Andrew. And again, I just can't say it enough. Customers on a fixed budget, you know, these being able to retrofit and leverage the supply chain of xByte has really helped out a lot of our customers get into this modernized approach. So again, you can take those existing 430s, we can actually cluster those with new 440s. So we can kind of mix match these clusters. So you can kind of phase these out as you look to bring in new R440s and so on and so forth across the Dell portfolio of servers. One last thing I want to mention on the previous slide is this price includes, you know, vSphere, VSAN, and vCenter. So if you've already got vSphere and vCenter, you can bring that over to this new environment, and this price is going to actually get lower. So you can bring your own licensing to really, again, save yourself some money here. So just wanted to point that out before we moved on.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. And so here's the different flavors of vSAN. It's typically licensed per CPU. When you license it per CPU, you can put as many VMs on that hardware as it can accommodate. So 3 different flavors, pretty similar to vSphere, standard, advanced, and enterprise. When you look at the advanced version, that's where we start giving you space efficiency features like dedupe, compression. Enterprise is where we're going to give you that stretch cluster capability like we looked at earlier, as well as data at rest encryption. So per CPU, you can start out with the standard and you can upgrade to advanced. You just have to pay the difference in cost. So there are upgrade options, and we can license this per VM if you want to do more of a remote office, branch office use case like we looked at earlier. So just wanted to show the 3 different flavors of the software here. So vSAN, the way it's licensed, it'll basically just sit on top of your vSphere licenses. And one last thing, I just want to touch on our overall ecosystem. I think this is another piece that, you know, kind of separates us from our competitors. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got all these different OEMs that we can run vSAN on. Heck, I've even got customers that have Dell and HP nodes inside of the same cluster. So we're completely hardware agnostic. We don't care as long as it's on our hardware compatibility list. Like I mentioned earlier, the 4,200 cloud partners that you can leverage for, you know, DR as a service, infrastructure as a service. Let us help you, you know, get into that hybrid cloud and that modernized approach. All the different ISVs building on top of it. You know, 500,000 customers on vSphere. We're 21,000 and growing fast on vSAN. So just wanted to share this real quick because I don't think anybody else out there has an ecosystem quite like VMware does. And just some takeaways, you know, we're able to allow you to do more on a smaller footprint. So now you can, again, leverage what you already have and grow off of that. You know, it's VMware native storage. So again, you've got that VMware reliability that you can trust and count on. Let's help you reduce the overall, you know, operational expenses. Let's shrink that footprint, and let's give you an easier way to scale. You know, instead of buying just big, you know, boxes of iron, big old storage arrays, you know, let's help you scale when your business needs it instead of having to buy all that storage up front. So just some key takeaways here I wanted to point out. And on this slide right here, if you're interested in getting started, this is where we would, as a next step, we would like to run this live optic assessment. So what this is, it's an assessment that will measure the performance requirements of your VMs. So we can see exactly how much CPU, RAM, disk it's using. And this will give us the data to size up that cluster to see how much RAM you're going to need. What does the disk configuration need to look like? So we can get pretty prescriptive on how we design out the solution specifically for your performance requirements. And I think we're going to do one more poll here and to see if anybody would be interested in starting this assessment. So I'll turn it over to Lindsay, let her launch the poll for a few minutes, and we'll go ahead and wrap up after that. Yeah, and while everybody is dispositioning on the poll, I just wanted to point out on this live optics assessment, I've had tons of customers recently where, currently they're running 8 or a 10 node cluster. Once we run this assessment, we can see that they're way over provisioned on CPU, on other resources. So now we're able to take that, 8 or 10 node cluster and, we can reduce that down to a 5 or 6 node cluster. So what that's going to do, again, is reduce the footprint. It's also going to reduce the licensing cost of your VMware support. It's going to save you money in Microsoft costs. So everybody's trying to consolidate. So this is a great assessment that we can run, see what you're actually using, design it specifically for your needs, and make you and your company run as efficient as possible. So we'll give it another couple seconds. We'll close out the poll, and we'll leave us some time here for some Q&A. Okay, Lindsay, if you want to go ahead and wrap that up, we'll go ahead and all right. Okay, just some resources here before we close it out. Storage Hub is the VSAN landing page for VMware vSAN. So if you want to get some reference architectures, deployment guides, information on the 2-node designs, etc., how do customers run SQL with vSAN? This has an abundance of resources that you can use. Our hands-on labs, a free lab that you can leverage to actually test drive and kick the tires on the solution. We do have our blogs as well, and then you're also welcome to reach out to me directly if you need to. So we'll make sure these get out to everybody on the session today. And then with that being said, I guess we'll kind of open it up for Q&A for the last few minutes. So,
real quick, one last thing before we start Q&A. I just want to say for some one other housekeeping thing, we're going to do the random drawing for the gift card offline, and we will email the winner of the gift card. So good luck to you all. And with that said, I think we got our first question from Robert. He was asking, can I use my current storage, my MD3400 storage unit?
Ooh, that's a good one there. Okay. Ooh, I should have covered that in the presentation earlier. But to answer the question, yes. So you can actually take your existing MD3400 or 3200, whatever that power vault may be, or even Compellent or EqualLogic. You can actually use that in conjunction with the vSAN cluster. So basically what you're going to do is you can run some VMs on your power vault or your EqualLogic. You'll have some VMs running on the internal storage of your PowerEdge servers. And then to make that even better, we have a feature called Storage vMotion. So you can migrate the VM, a live migration from the power vault to the server disk and vice versa. So basically, if your power vault is, the performance is getting bad or you're reaching its capacity limits, okay, no problem. Let's Storage vMotion that VMDK over to the local drives of the host, and we'll just run the VM there. And if you ever need to, you can move it back. So yeah, that's another good thing about vSAN is we play very well with your existing hardware components as to where our competitors are going to want you to rip all that stuff out and buy their appliance. So really good question.
And that's great because right, they've invested all this money into their current infrastructure, and then they're saying, hey, well, you got to rip all that out. We're saying, hey, let's use that in your current infrastructure and let's build off of that. So that's great information there. Before we get to the next question, one last thing. Lindsay had one more question regarding, or one more poll, just reaching out to see if anybody needed or wanted to have some contact for one-on-one for a demo to go through some stuff. I wanted to make sure that that got out there as well. So if you're interested in a one-on-one demo with Tyson or myself, just select yes, and we'll make sure that we can get if you want to look into it a little bit more, do the assessment, also get a quote for what that might look like if we're going to upgrade you. There's no obligation. We just want to be able to help our customers, and you, if you're looking into this and you want to know what that's going to cost me in the long run, let's go ahead and put some numbers down for you. So I'll as you guys are going in there, we had another question that came in from Chris. It says, can I still use my 1 gig network switch?
Ooh, great question. So yes, you can use the 1 gig switches still. Now that is only going to be supported on our hybrid configurations. So that means you'll have SSD for cache and you'll have HDD spindles for your capacity drives. So for that, we do support the 1 gig switches that, if you're using today, we can still leverage those switches to save cost. If you're wanting to use an all-flash design, that is going to require 10 gig. However, I've seen xByte selling 10 gig switches for pretty cheap these days. So yeah, since everybody's jumping into 25, 40 gig switches, the cost of 10 gig is very reasonable. So if you're looking to kind of refresh the whole environment, we would suggest jumping into that 10 gig backbone to kind of future-proof your environment, give you incredible performance.
And Chris's follow-up question to that is, remote site, can he still use 1 gig for the remote site, or does he have to go to 10 gig?
You can still use 1 gig at the remote site, but again, it has to be a hybrid configuration. Now, at the remote site, if you want to do a 2-node configuration, you don't even need to switch out there. You can direct connect those 2 servers, and that's fully supported through VMware with VSAN 2-node configs.
Perfect. All right. That's all the questions that we have right now. Just going to open up if there's any other questions. Feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can email Tyson Taylor or myself, Andrew Ripley. Our emails are on the screen now, so feel free to drop us an email. Any questions that you may have, we can build out solutions for you. That's what we're here for. Want to make sure that we've taken care of everything. It looks like another question is coming in. Will this be available as a replay? Yes. We will send it out to everybody that registered for the webinar. You'll get the link from xByte. I believe it's coming from Lindsay or myself. But look for that. It will be a link where you can replay it. If you have any additional questions, or if you don't see it, please feel free to reach out, and we'll make sure that everybody gets it. It looks like there are a couple more questions. How hard is it to move VMs from my PS6500 over?
Ooh, old EqualLogic array. That brings up back in my Dell days. So that is going to depend on what version of vSphere you're running today. So if you're on version 6.0, 6.5, 6.7, that means it would be as simple as a storage vMotion. So what we can do is take the vSAN cluster and we'll connect it to the vCenter that you're currently using today, and we'll use a feature called storage vMotion. So we will do a live migration off that old EqualLogic array over to the new vSAN cluster. As simple as that, little to no downtime. Now, if you're on an older version of vSphere, let's say 5.1, 5.5, that's going to make it a little bit trickier. If that's the case, you may have to upgrade your vSphere environment to a 6.x version to do that seamless migration. If not, then it would have to be a cold migration where you power down the VM and manually push it over. Great question, though.
We got a couple more questions. To run with SSD disks, how do you provision this with vSAN?
When you run with SSD disk, how do you
provision this with vSAN?
Okay. So again, we're going to take all of that disk in the cluster and we're going to abstract it and we're going to present it as one big data store. So you're just going to see one big pool of storage, and then provisioning it, you're going to set that up with storage policies. So when you create that VM, it's going to say, hey, how many virtual CPUs do I want it to have? How much storage do I want to provision it? How do I want to protect it? Do I want to do a copy of this VM? Do I want to do 3 copies of it? And what kind of performance do I want it to have? Do I want this thing, living in that caching layer? You can set IOP limits around it. So the provisioning is all going to be set up through our storage policy management.
And I think you may have answered this in that answer. Looks like it could be a follow-up, is in a hybrid environment, if I would like to have a particular VM, example, a database, to run with SSDs, how do you provision this with vSAN? Is that still in your provision manager?
Yep, you would set a policy that says, hey, this is this is a SQL log or this is a SQL server, I want that to live in that caching SSD layer if you were in fact running a hybrid configuration. So yeah, again, with these policies, you dictate performance, you dictate availability. If it's SQL, we can put as many copies as you want and force it to live in the SSD layer. If it's a print server or a fax server, well, then maybe you don't want any copies of that, because if it goes down, who cares? So you're going to dictate that performance and availability with the storage policies in our management console.
Another question is, would the VSAN environment work as fast as a normal SAN? And I'm just going to go with what I know, and then Tyson, I want you to jump in. But I actually think we can scale it up and out. So the more servers with the more processors and the more compute you have, the faster it's going to be. But I will throw that back over to Tyson for to add on to that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We always want to see the performance benchmarks, and I'll tell you right now, we've done bake-offs with pure storage arrays, all flash, millions of IOPS, because we don't have to send our ones and zeros out to the switch, out to the storage array, back into the server to support the VM. There's not as many hops there, so it's localized storage, so it's actually going to be far better performance. If you do an all-flash cluster with VSAN, you will have more IOPS than you ever dreamed of. So when we compare it to a traditional 3-tiered infrastructure, we blow the doors off of it every single time. So
that's what I'd like to hear.
That's just, yeah.
All right, so a couple more questions. Man, they're flooding in here. So when using an all-flash configuration, is it best practice to RAID the disk using the onboard controller, or just let vCenter configure all the disks in storage? Which I think you may have answered a little earlier, that it's done at the node level, right? I mean, the VM level. Yeah.
So we're doing RAID at a node level, not at a disk level. So you're not going to set a RAID 1 up between disks. We're doing RAID through software at a node level. So if you have a VM running on host 1, then you can have a mirrored copy of that VM on host 2 or 3 or 4. And then with the storage policies, you can say, hey, I want 4 copies or 5 copies. I want a copy on every single host. So that way, if I lose a couple of hosts, I'm still operational. So again, back to those storage policies, you're going to dictate, performance and availability. But again, to answer the question, we're not doing RAID at a disk level. We'll still use a RAID controller HBA. We're just going to leave that in pass-through mode. And, we're doing a software RAID at a node level.
All right, so the next one says, vSAN was only mentioned on the first solution. There was something else for the other two, vFoundation, I think. Does this include vSAN?
Yeah, so VMware Cloud Foundation is going to be our full stack approach. So what VMware Cloud Foundation consists of is vSphere for compute, vSAN for storage, NSX for network virtualization, and then vRealize, which is our management suite that sits on top of everything. So VMware Cloud Foundation is our full stack approach where, when you go to provision a VM, well, now you can provision compute, you can provision storage. Oh, and by the way, now you can assign them an IP address. You can wrap it up with firewall rules. And then once you deploy that VM, you can move it anywhere between nodes. You can move it out to a public cloud, and you don't have to worry about having any hardware dependencies. Basically, with that full stack approach, we're decoupling the IP address from the hardware, so that way you can move it and allow it to live anywhere. So that full stack approach is called VMware Cloud Foundation. That's where it gets pretty expensive. We're talking, $10,000 up to $20,000 per CPU. But that's where we're designing a data center that's going to operate like a public cloud, like AWS or Azure. So right now, that's being adopted by our Fortune, Global 2000 customers. So they're using that. We've got some customers down in the SMB space that are slowly starting to adopt it because that's just what their business requires.
Okay.
So yeah, so that is the full stack approach. But for myself, I've been working with small, medium-sized companies for the last 15 years. So a lot of them are using vSphere today. that next step for these customers is leveraging VSAN as well.
Perfect. All right, I got looks like 3 more. I think this is a fairly simple one. On a 2-node with 10 gig, what is needed to connect to the switch for management?
For 2-node with 10 gig, so you're going to have two 10 gig network interface cards, or 2 open ports. So one is going to be for management, one is going to be for the traffic. Again, I'm not the engineer here, so if there's any questions like that, networking is not my forte, so I'm happy to kind of take some of these offline and get one of my senior engineers to really discuss that networking. But again, we usually on that type of configuration, there's going to be 2 ports, one for management, one for traffic.
All right. Also for Dell 10 gig SFP, what type of cable do you use? Again, I think that's maybe more of an engineer question. So we'll if you want to email us, we'll take that and give it to our management team to give you what type of cable that is. Last one that I have here is a migrate VHDX Hyper-V into VMware. I'd like to move the operating system first, fire them up on the new hardware, then leaving the data VHDX files and start copying the files over to new volumes. They have 10 terabytes plus. Any other ways to do this live?
So going from Hyper-V to ESXi, I think if I heard that correctly, we do have a converter tool, free converter tool to go from Hyper-V to ESXi. Again, this is probably a question where we need to bring in one of our, engineers to kind of talk about the best way to do that. To my understanding is you can use our free converter tool from Hyper-V to ESXi. Once you get onto ESXi, then we have a feature called Storage vMotion. That's where you can do a live migration of, not only the compute, but also the data along with the application. I'm not sure if that's fully answering the question there, but again, that's one I'm happy to take offline with whoever asked it, get with one of my engineers, and we make sure we can address that correctly to you.
Very good. And also on the cable question, I also wanted to touch base. I wasn't trying to push it off. There's different things that we need to know about the connectors and also the length of the cable and so forth. So getting a little bit more specific, there's some follow-up questions we need to know. So I didn't want you to think I was just pushing it off, but to answer that question, we need a little bit more information. So, all right.
Yeah, and I just jumped back on the slide here. So the storage hub right here, great section on the networking. So SFP Plus is something that we commonly use. There's one other as well. I just can't think of it off the top of my head. But basically, you want those, network cards on the server to kind of match to whatever's going back up to your switch. So there's a few different that we support there. But if you go to that storagehub.vmware.com, jump into the networking section, and you will have an abundance of material that you can sift through to probably answer that on your own. But again, happy to take anybody offline and have a discussion with one of our engineers to really make sure we're fully addressing your question.
All right. Well, we're about 6 minutes over. I really want to thank everybody for coming and attending. We want to help you. We want to help you, build out your solution. Want to make sure it's the right solution. Let's provision it correctly. Let's scale it up and out. Let's do the live assessment, the live optics assessment, so we can get that for you. Please feel free to reach out to us. But again, I want to thank everybody for attending, and I look forward to talking with you guys soon. Thank you, Tyson. Thank you, Lindsay. Really appreciate you guys coming on and helping out and getting this information out there.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure, Andrew. And thank you and the xByte team for being such a great partner to VMware. Appreciate the time, everybody, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.